So you've closed over $2 billion in commercial real estate loans, which is like insane to me.
I don't know if this was a big break, but it's one of the things that I tell younger people is, so the biggest one we've done to date was like just under 80 million. We just closed it actually like a few weeks ago.
Ah, nice. Talk about it.
I don't know if I have like a hot take that's too different from what you're saying.
Okay.
I'll maybe add a little bit of flavor. So,
all right, John Gitman, it's a pleasure to have you here.
thank you.
I'm excited to have the conversation. So you've closed over $2 billion in commercial real estate loans, which is like insane to me. And before going into your career transitions and kind of how you got to where you are today, for the listeners, I'm just curious, because when people think about real estate, I feel like they think about, I'm gonna buy a house, or I'm gonna buy a multifamily, I'm gonna buy this, or I'm gonna build something. They think I'm gonna buy or develop. You guys are lenders. So what does BridgeInvest do? I know you're a partner there, and I guess just walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's certainly other parts of the industry than just owning, right? Certainly like what you do, for instance, on the brokerage side of things. But on the lending side of the business, I'd sort of say we're kind of like the oil that keeps like the wheel like spinning, right? I mean, if you think about any deal in the real estate space, typically anywhere between 50 to 75% of the money going into the deal is actually debt.
It's
right?
John.
Right, and myself, rather, sure. All the deals would be yes.
Yeah.
So it's a really important piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And even if you're on the equity side, understanding what lenders want, how lenders look at deals is really important to ultimately executing your transaction. Mm-hmm. Now that being said, what do we do, right? We typically get involved in the deal, really most lenders get involved in the deal at one of three stages. So either you're buying a property, right? So there's a new acquisition and there's new money coming in.
Yeah.
So we will provide a senior mortgage at that point. There are other lenders that do mezzanine loans, preferred equity loans. So there's different places up and down the capital stack that you can play. We're in the senior position space, but it's acquisition. When your existing loan needs to be refinanced, that's the second opportunity. And then the third opportunity is construction, right? So you're sort of doing some sort of major value add.
Yeah.
It could be a renovation, it doesn't have to be ground up. Yeah. But typically when a property is being physically changed significantly, you need new money, which usually means new debt coming into the project. And we provide capital into those situations.
Right. So for the most part, basically you guys have investors that sort of, do you have a fund, or is it like, hey, we've got a deal, and so you have a fund? And
yeah, so to answer that question, so we're actually raising our fifth fund right now.
Nice.
We are wrapping up deployment of our fourth fund, like literally in the next 30, 60 days.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And our last fund was about 670 million of investor commitments, with everything ranging from individual investors giving a $500,000 check to an institutional investor with a $300 million commitment.
Got it.
So it varies pretty broadly. But it's important to have that in the debt business. There are different types of lenders, like banks just have their balance sheet, money deposits, etc. But many of the debt funds in the industry, like bridge lenders, construction lenders like us, tend to have a fund, which just allows you to have that capital ready to deploy for those real estate investors when they need it.
When I call you and say, hey, I have a $100 million deal under contract, I need $60 million, you're like, yeah, we have that to deploy.
Available to deploy.
We just need to underwrite it, make sure we're comfortable with it, and we send it out. Exactly. And as an investor, basically it's, hey, I probably, if the property triples in value, as the lender, I'm not sharing in those benefits for the most part, but if the property, you're sheltered from a lot of, potential downsides, right?
Yeah, so look, it just depends where you at in the real estate cycle, right? You're exactly right about what you said. So the reason why people like debt is, let's say you do a $100 million deal and you finance it with $65 million from us, right? Yeah. Let's say that's typical. You put in 35 million, right? You and your investors.
Yeah, I put 3.5. But go on. Yeah.
if that property is worth $150 million at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
You made $50 million of profit on your 35 million of equity.
Right.
We just make our 7, 8, 9%.
Right.
Like that's all we make.
Correct.
Right. So we don't share in that. It's just a fixed, it could be a floating rate, which depends upon like the SOFR or treasuries, but you know, it's typically more or less fixed, right?
Yeah.
Now on the flip side, the last few years where we've seen a lot of like value erosion, we've absolutely had deals where our borrowers saw the other side of that equation, right? Their equity went from from that 35 million, the asset might have gone down $20 million. So they lost like 2/3 of their money, but we're still 100% protected.
Correct.
And that's what we pitch to our investors is like, if, you know, BridgeInvest, we started in 2011 and we had COVID, right? So that was a pretty tough year in 2020.
Yeah.
And then the last like year and a half, 2 years have also been very tough.
Yeah.
Like the range of our returns over that whole entire time period have effectively been like 8 to 12%, right?
Amazing.
With like no years of losses.
If that's what people want, right?
Zero losses.
And honestly, right now the markets are so volatile and so, you know, I don't want to say frothy, but like people think they're, you know, things are close to happening. That if you can just clip an 8 to 12%, it's like, that's amazing, you know, and it's agnostic to like stock market returns and things like that. So I don't want to get carried away and go into, because I have a bunch of questions, but I kind of want to start like, how did you even get to this point, right? You were born in Ukraine, is that right?
I don't even know if I'm first generation. I mean, I was actually born overseas. So I was born in Ukraine, and my family immigrated here in 1989 when I was a little kid, like 3 years old. So
to where? What part of like?
To Miami, actually, which
nice.
is really unique.
Oh, you're an OG. Okay.
Yeah. I'm like old school. I grew up here, went to middle, high school, all that here.
Let me ask you a question. When you were graduating high school, were you like, hey, I'm definitely coming back and like building a career and a family here? Or were you like, this place is too whatever it was at the time?
For me, yes. Like personally, I'm super family oriented. You know, my whole family like does live here. So for me, that was always a thought. And like, honestly, like, you know, who doesn't want to come back to Miami, in my opinion? But it was tough. I'll tell you, like, let's say I had like 10 close friends that I grew up with. Probably only like 3 of them live here now. Maybe that's 5, like post-COVID, a couple extra moved back. But it has historically been tough to sort of like have, you know, especially like financial or like more business-oriented careers here in Miami. But obviously that's changed over the last like 5 years, really significantly. And I see it like just, you know, my kids, like the parents of their classmates now. It's completely
like,
different.
Oh wow, they do what? Or who?
Venture capital. I mean, one of their friends at Citadel. It's completely changed.
I meet people now that make $400,000 salary, and I'm like, dude, you did not exist in Miami like 4 years ago. There's no 100%, way. You only made that money if you were like an entrepreneur or sales, like something. So you end up going to, did you go college was?
So I finished high school here. I went to Miami Country Day School, and then I went to Penn. So
smart.
Yeah, so personally, like, you know, my dad was an entrepreneur. My mother was a real estate agent. So for me, and then also like I graduated high school in 2004. So kind of getting into like the thought about my career in sort of 05, 06, 07 when I was in college, that was really like the peak of like the condo boom here. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to do like finance because like that's the whole business thing. And then it was like real estate, like that was just the talk around the dinner table. So you graduated college what year? Was it like financial crisis? 2008.
How was that?
So everything I planned went horribly wrong. So, you know, all of that development and real estate and excitement around it, like everything went upside down. So I effectively graduated like right as the GFC was starting. It ended up being a huge opportunity. Like, I know we were talking earlier about like big breaks. I don't know if this was a big break, but it's one of the things that I tell younger people is don't just go work at places where the brand name is a great brand name, but go look for jobs where you're going to get a lot of opportunity and a lot of exposure. Because when you're like 23 to 28, like your first 5 years, it's all about what you learn. Like you're not going to make that much more money at one place or the other. And what happened was I went to this like typical real estate firm. They were doing value add apartment deals.
In Miami?
In Philadelphia. I stayed in Philadelphia. And it was like your typical like buy a B class product, renovate the interiors, raise rents by a couple $100 and sell it in 5 years, right? Typical multifamily value add model. What happened was that completely went to the wayside, right? And they fired a ton of people, or like a lot of people got moved to asset management because it became more about like working the deals that you have versus buying new deals because there was no money for that. But then there was this huge note buying opportunity that came out of the GFC. And luckily for me, I had nothing to do with it, but you know, the company was able to like raise capital around that strategy. But like when I joined, there was I think 8 people on the acquisitions team. And then all of a sudden there were 3 and 2 of them were analysts. So there was effectively like the head guy and like 2 20-year-olds, right? Including myself. And, you know, I mean, I guess I never gave them a reason to hire anyone above me.
They're like, it's pretty capable.
But it was crazy. I mean, by the time I left, I was like 28. And like I had personally run like $300-400 million of deals where I was like the head guy in my early 20s, and the amount I learned was like irreplaceable, right?
I could imagine.
So that was like a really interesting sort of like lucky break. And it helps me now because seeing the workout of all those debt deals helps me be thoughtful about the new deals that we're doing at BridgeInvest today.
And the advice you gave is so important. And it's the same thing I tell a lot of people that reach out when I'm just like, dude, don't worry about 70 grand or 80 grand or 90, 95. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like you want to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, hopefully millions. It's like, what's going to matter is the exposure you get in the team that you're going to be in.
100%.
Full stop. You know, almost, I often think if you go into too big of a shop, I don't want to speak for all big shops, but if you go to too big of a shop, they have so many things going on that they'll like sort of silo you into like this one thing. Whereas like my friends that have gone into smaller shops where like everyone's got to pick up the work across the whole vertical, they learn and they're much more, you know, well-versed than some of my other friends, which is like interesting because typically you want to jump for the big name, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you were at that firm for how long? 2008, 9 to...
2008 through 2012. I spent a year outside of real estate, which was a funny experience.
Playing basketball?
For the Heat. And then joined BridgeInvest in 2013.
Okay, so I just my personal curiosity, the notes that you guys were buying, can you, if you remember, can you walk me through how a deal, because I haven't been in that type of predicament where people are selling notes. I mean, we're under contract to sell a note right now, but walk me through one of those deals.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's totally different than it's happening now. So we've both sold, bought, and financed notes over like the past year or so, and I'm happy to speak to that. I'll touch on it a little bit here. What was interesting then was effectively like, I don't want to say all, but a significant amount of real estate transactions were done as note sales. So it actually became sort of like the market standard, and there were very defined processes.
And walk me through what a note sale is.
Sure. So like some of them were, Bank of America selling $2 billion worth of notes, it's like 2,000 positions, and some of them were just like single asset, note sales of a single, building. Most of the ones we participated in were the latter, like single asset deals. Mm-hmm. And it was very like formalized. Like you had note sale brokers. It could be someone like a Bricadia. There were more specific
my
groups.
Partner Jarrett sold a bunch of notes.
Like a Mission Capital or like a DebtX, where like these were kind of like specifically like just note sale shops.
Yeah.
And it was like, sign an NDA. They give you some amount of information, not horrible, but not particularly good.
Yeah.
Like you can ask questions, but you don't really get answers. And then like you had to bid in 30 days. And it was a hard call for offers. It didn't get extended. Like you had to be ready to bid. And then they would do like a best and final, maybe 2 weeks later. And if you won the best and final, they gave you a purchase and sale agreement, and there was no negotiation, right? Like maybe
sign on the dotted line.
Sign on the dotted line. Like maybe one or two things, and all of them included like hard 10% deposits, and closed like 2 weeks later.
Right. All they wanted was certainty.
Yeah, all they wanted was certainty.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. But the thing is, as a buyer, it was really interesting because we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket per deal without even being awarded the deal. Forget crazy. About whether you are or not going to close. Like you don't know if you're getting the bid.
Right.
And there was, of course, like efficiencies that we had around that.
Yeah. But the thought back in the day was basically like, hey, I'm Bank of America. I made a loan for $60 million on a $100 million asset. Great financial crisis happens. This asset's now worth $50 million.
50. Yeah.
My loan's at 60. I could only sell I now control the deal, right? Effectively, because the equity between the 100 and the 60 is wiped out. Mm-hmm. So now I'm Bank of America. I now own this deal, and I can sell it for $50 million to John and the firm that he was with. So then they come and they do a bidding process at that 50. The bank takes that loss, but they get it off their books. That's effectively...
That's exactly what was happening. And they had to for a couple of reasons. One is regulators were forcing them to.
Yeah.
And we should touch base on that because it's a really interesting thing that's changed in today's environment. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is their entire balance sheet was in default, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a bank, I mean, even if you have like an asset management, like REO department, it's only so big, right? So it was pretty crazy. Like some of the large special servicing shops, right? Yeah. Like a lot of them are based here in Miami. There were like some loans that they were selling like 5 years later. And I was kind of scratching my head, like, what's wrong with this deal, right? Because like, why is it still here 5 years later?
Yeah.
And like, you have like honest conversations with people that you like are friends with that work at these shops. And they're like, we just didn't have the time to get to it. Yeah. Right? There were so many problems.
Yeah. We have 25 deals that we're trying to manage, and that's that one that we forgot. Or
2,500 deals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. You want to be a buyer in those situations.
Right.
We'll just pick this one up here.
Yeah.
I sold a piece of land for like $8.5 million 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. The guy bought the land for like $800,000 in like 2009 or 10.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know what he told me? He's like, not only did I buy it for like 800 grand, but the bank that sold me the deal lent me like 600 grand. So I bought it for 200 grand, held it for 15 years, whatever it was. And now Omar's selling it for 8.5 million. I'm like, that'll work out. That'll work out for you. So then how does BridgeInvest, how do you get to BridgeInvest? Why transition? I kind of want to know what was that year gap you did?
I worked actually for a family friend who was starting a beverage company.
Okay.
And he didn't really know that much about it. He was more of an investor. He had hired someone else to kind of run it. And just the guy needed some help. So I came in and sort of took over like the company, if you will. I mean, the company was like, me in a closet, but,
but it's just, you were at the shop for whatever reason. You thought this was like a different opportunity?
I just wanted to move home.
Because you were in Philadelphia this whole time.
Right, I was in Philadelphia. So I just wanted to move home. And like, this is like before work from home was a thing, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't want to offer me the opportunity. I asked, I was like, hey, I'll work from home or work from Miami. They just weren't into it. And I just had this opportunity. The guy paid me pretty well.
Go for it.
So I went for it. It was a horrific failure. But it was one of those things you learn a ton from. And then...
but I'm glad you mentioned it, because most people, when they hear you talking, it just seems like a straight line up. And for me too, they're like, Omar, you did this and this and this. And I'm like, dude, it was like this. On the way up.
Well, and by the way, you have to have perseverance and grit. That's such a great point. Even the most successful people, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you what Elon Musk's or Jeff Bezos' story is, but I can guarantee you they had plenty of downs, right? And you can't get too upset. You got to pick yourself up. And sometimes what I've found is, everyone I know has different stories, but they all kind of ended up at the right place.
Yeah.
So sometimes life is just funny like that. Sometimes you need that loss to have you refocus in a different area or something like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk almost went bankrupt like 3-4 times because he goes all in on his companies. And then Jeff Bezos went from making like $500,000 a year in 1999, which is crazy, to pivoting to sell books. Like those are crazy, like risk, on a lot of risk appetite for those things. And to your point, a lot of grit throughout. So how do you land that BridgeInvest?
One of the simple lessons that I learned was like stick to what you know.
Not beverages.
Yeah. So it's middle of 2013, and Miami was interesting because there weren't. It obviously was one of the poster childs for like the condo crash, right? Boom and then crash. So although the market was generally recovered, I think Miami was still like a little bit like behind at that time. And also, like we said, there weren't that many of these like institutional type opportunities. So a lot of the groups that I sort of saw myself speaking to were like a lot of like family offices. Like there's a lot of that in Miami, just wealthy people want to be here. Yeah. And I just kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, like unless your name is on the door, like you're not part of the family. And I was like, I don't know if that's where I'm going to succeed or what I want to do. Yeah. And honestly, it was funny. Like I just applied for this job. I didn't know what BridgeInvest was, quite frankly, because I don't think it was much at that time.
Just like,
Alex Horn had started at the company like 2 years prior. Probably by that time, maybe we had done like 5 deals, something of that nature. Yeah. We had 30-40 million under management, like very small, like that's not a lot in the debt business.
In the debt business, yeah.
And I was just like, who are these guys? Like they're actually younger than me. Yeah. It's like 2 guys. But they're now my partners. And what I liked about it at that point was I was like, okay, first of all, these are great people. Yeah. Like you meet my partners and in 5 minutes, you're like, these are really good guys. Right. And number 2 is it was pretty clear they had a lot of access to capital and a lot of strong connections. Yeah. It was just the business was at this like starting point. Yeah. Right. And I was like, look, this is like a good mix because one of the things that I also learned is like, it's really hard to start a business on your own. Like going from scratch by yourself is really difficult. So like, look, I took like a more than 50% pay haircut from what I was making before. Yeah. And I was just like, I'm going to like buy into this and like see what happens. And
when you say buy into it, did you actually buy into the company?
Sorry,
I'm going to buy into the dream. Like into the story. Okay. How old are you?
I was 2013, so 27.
27. Yeah. So okay, like I just want to emphasize, you took a 50% pay cut when you were 27, right?
Yeah, and it was the best decision I ever made.
Right. Going back to like not always just going for like money that year or like that 100%. Incremental bonus. A lot of the biggest wins in my life have been from like non-financial decisions, short term, because of the position it'll put me in long term.
100%.
So you get it. You're in the company 2013.
Yeah, 2013. And look, like we've grown. I mean, it was actually funny. So the first deal we signed up. I mean, let's talk about deals. This is a really funny transaction. The first deal we signed up was $40 million. Okay, keep in mind, like the
total deal size.
One deal, but like the whole entire like business AUM was like 30 at that time, right? Yeah. So it was pretty wild, and I was like, "How are we going to do this?" I don't know if anyone had a really good answer to that, but we were all like, "We're going to figure it out," right? And by the way, I had to close in like 45 days, right? Like so. I was just like, okay, like this is cool. And it was actually an amazing land portfolio. The key piece of real estate was actually 14 acres in Hillsborough Beach, which is now the desert-related project.
Cool.
I believe it's the Rosewood Residences.
Rosewood.
Rosewood, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great site.
So that was like the first deal I worked on.
They're getting $2,000 a foot there.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. It's an amazing piece of real estate. But basically the story was like, the borrower was like this rich Australian guy who made all this money in like trucking for mines, and sold business, made a lot of money, moved to South Florida, lived in like Boca, West Palm, whatever. But the guy was like 95 and a little cuckoo. And he was just like impossible to deal with. And it was, the recession hit him hard because he owned all this land and he would build like some homes, but he didn't really have cash flowing assets. It was all non-cash flowing land pretty much. And the recession hit him hard, and he kept on kind of like rolling through a few loans with people, going from bank to bridge to hard money,
That's when you know.
Yeah. But it was nuts. Like, I mean, there's so many stories. Like, he wouldn't hire like a normal lawyer. He hired his son. The son was like all over the place. I literally, for due diligence, went to the guy's house. I swear to God. I went to the guy's house and I was ruffling through papers to like help him find like the survey and if we needed to close. I mean, it was nuts.
We're doing a deal with like an 80-year-old lady right now. I was at her house with getting I'm like, do you have a survey? She's like, it's at my house. I'm literally like a survey this big.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
I mean, it was nuts.
So were you guys, has the investment have you guys always been doing what you're doing today, or has that shifted?
No, it's a great question. It's actually shifted quite a bit. So really post 2022 in this new interest rate environment, what we asked ourselves was, we're doing floating rate runs, right? And like historically we were getting investors, like let's just call it a 10%, just roughly speaking. So we kind of looked at it as you have a few options. The most obvious one is keep doing exactly what you're doing, which was a lot of these like really kind of opportunistic, non-cash flowing deals, and try to go from a 10% return to a 15% return. Or we said, hey, listen, look, like it's also a really risky environment, and like maybe that's not a great idea to do like risk on transactions. What if we start pursuing these less risky transactions? And because of the new interest rate environment, we actually get very similar returns to what we've done in the past, but with much better credit.
When you say new interest rate environment, you mean right now?
Right now, yeah. So like 5% SOFR versus 0% SOFR, right? And we decided to pursue that strategy. And it's been great. I mean, if you look at our loan book, like sort of since 2022, it's performing extremely well. The returns actually, interestingly enough, were somewhere kind of in the middle. Like we still were actually able to increase returns, even though we went to much better credit quality.
How do you increase returns on like a debt transaction? Are you just saying, hey, I was projecting 12 and we made the loans at 14? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, like more or less, right? Like, we used to charge 10, now we're charging 12, right?
And it's still a safe sort of loan that you're making.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like we used to charge 10 and like now we're charging like 11. Like it's not a huge difference, right? But like,
but it's still, and you're
10% difference.
Safe,
But we're also we went from financing like a piece of land, right, which is non-cash flowing, you have to develop it. Like we actually really like land loans, we still do them, but like there's a lot of risk, right? Like you have to be careful about those deals. To now we're financing like cash flowing multifamily deals, which are very low risk, and actually getting like very similar returns. So
from 2022 that you mentioned, sort of in this new interest rate environment, how many, just orders of magnitude, that would be exact, have you made 20 loans, 500 loans? Like how, more or less?
So over the past year, we did 15 transactions for like 600 million.
Okay.
And so about 40 million on average.
I was going to say,
yeah. And in the past year, I don't think we did one land loan at the end of last year, here in Miami World Center.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I did see that.
Yep.
Yeah. Who was it? Naftali?
No. For Art Falcone and like a group of private investors.
Yeah. With Block E, I think.
Excuse me?
Block E?
Block C.
Block C.
It's right next to Paramount.
The one with the soccer field?
Yes, the one with the soccer field.
I know it well.
That soccer field was interesting.
I've played there many times.
Well,
so when I look at, you're saying, okay, call it 15, 20 loans a year. Let's just throw a number out there. So over the last 2-3 years, has that been, maybe you don't know the answer off the top of your head, but like how much of that has been construction loan to a developer versus like land loan versus office?
No, that's the exact question. So about 30-40% of it was multifamily. We did one land loan, that's it, no construction loans. One project was sort of bridge plus construction. It was like retail where there were some existing like pad sites or existing retail, and what they were building was like a Starbucks and a Chipotle, right? So kind of like low risk construction. And then the other, portion of it was a mix of mostly retail, hotel. We did one office deal actually here in Coconut Grove.
Oh, nice.
But that's my point, right? Like If you asked me about 2021,
Yeah.
it was probably 50% construction, right? And it went to zero.
Right.
Now we are back in the construction market now. So we just relaunched that program here in 2025. But over the past 2 years, it was a really good time to be a lender.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just curious, what's like the biggest loan that you guys have placed, like single asset loan?
So the biggest one we've done to date was like just under 80 million. We just closed it actually like a few weeks ago.
Ah, nice. Talk about it.
We're following it up with like a $76 million deal like next week.
Okay.
So we've really grown just in terms of our capabilities over the last few years with all this new money that we've raised. Become a lot more institutional, but the deal was actually for a condo conversion deal in North Bay Village. It's a mid 60s built, two 10-story buildings. It was actually interesting. It was originally built as condos, and then in the 2000s converted to apartments, and now they're converting it back to condos.
Flavor of the decade.
Yeah,
Just
it's sort of interesting. But for me personally, like, I'm excited to be part of it. Other than the fact it's like a great sponsor that we've done multiple deals with, and I think that they're going to do really well. But I've always been like.
Could I ask who it is?
It's Isaac Toledano of BH Group.
Oh, you guys did the Wake.
Yeah, the Wake. Yeah.
Oh, dude. No way. Okay, yeah. So he works with Isaac.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just closed that.
So we're a lender on that, yeah.
Dude, that deal, the real estate, like Isaac is just like has a nose for real estate. That full corner
it's
of
amazing.
North Bay. It's better than the north side.
Of
North Bay Village.
Views. Yeah, for sure.
And you're also closest to the beach.
Yeah, like we got there and I was like, whoa, like. I mean, I live here, but it's not like you go to every like nook and cranny of the city, right?
Yeah.
And that part of like what I was saying was like 79th Street
That's so
has
funny.
been depressed, right? Like compared to other places. But I got there and I was like, whoa,
It's a beautiful view.
There's not a lot of entitlements there.
Like density and stuff.
Density, yes. But like, if you could just go build like a nice tower there,
crush it,
right? Like, I mean, the views are outrageous.
Yeah. And North Bay Village is going like crazy.
Yeah.
And on the east side of 71st, now you have the Deauville project, Ocean Terrace. Like you've got big projects. And I'm a believer in that section of the beach because basically it's still pretty underdeveloped relative to Surfside and South Beach.
Sure.
But it's now going to be developed with the new Miami in mind, which is 3,500 square foot oceanfront condos or 4,000 or 5,000 square foot. So people know how much they can actually, the higher quality product that they can deliver, and North Bay Village is right there. And you've got Bruce Eichner and Shoma and all these things happening in North Bay Village. I didn't know you guys did that. Okay, so walk me through that. You said that's a condo conversion deal?
Yes.
So,
Don't ask me all the numbers.
not the numbers.
I haven't had enough coffee this morning.
No, but basically, so when you say condo conversion, is the plan to buy and sell those as condos?
Yeah. So they're fully rented right now. I mean, they're fully stabilized and leased.
So it's just to give the listeners the idea. It's an apartment building, let's say 400 units, and it's older, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So I'm saying it's like 1960s built. I don't have the exact date in front of me.
But it's 10 stories on the water.
Yeah, 10 stories. It's actually two different buildings. So they'll probably keep one of them as apartments and just do one at a time. And ultimately what they're going to go in is basically redo the lobby, redo the amenities, and then redo all the units, right?
Yeah.
Like put in like...
Oh, so they're going to renovate it.
Yeah. So they're going to put in nicer finishes, right? So that buyer, although the building is, 60 years old at this point, basically everything that they're getting is effectively brand new.
Right.
And the price point is nowhere close to what other people are offering there, right? Yeah. Like you're going to be able to buy a unit there, like a 2-bedroom unit for $500,000-$600,000.
Yeah.
Your 2-bedroom unit in Shoma, which granted it's new construction, but it's in the middle of the island. So unless you have
not
to be
on the water,
top, not on the water.
Yeah.
So that's my point. Is unless you're on the top floor, like not to knock Shoma's project, but you're just not on the water. It is what it is, right? And your price point is going to be like 50%. Yeah. Right. Which at that point, it's like we all live here, like. Yeah. Where are you getting like a nice place on the water for $500,000?
Nowhere.
It doesn't exist.
Was it Mass Capital that sold it?
Yeah, Mass was the seller.
Mass was seller? Yeah. So basically the idea is your borrower, client, Isaac Toledano, comes in and says, hey, I can buy this whole apartment building, let's say at a 4.5 cap, I'm gonna throw a number out there, and that translates to $400,000 a unit. Let's just throw a number out there. I'll put $100,000 per unit into this building. So now my basis goes from 400,000 to 500,000, and I'm gonna go and sell these units on average for 800,000, just a random number, right? As condos, individually to people, right? So basically changing the asset, so the face of the asset, right? And now you guys walk me through like, okay, BridgeInvest comes in, what is the ask from someone like Isaac in a deal like this? And what do you guys have to like think about, kind of walk me through, the numbers don't matter, but.
It's great. I mean, look, roughly in terms of the numbers, what we did is we basically financed like 2/3 of what he paid for the buildings, and then we'll finance 100% of all the renovation dollars.
Okay.
And in our opinion, like we still think that ends up like being 50 to 60% of what they're ultimately worth, depending on how well he executes. That's like the rough math of what we do.
Got it.
Right.
And then when he starts selling those out as individual condos, your collateral sort of steps down with it?
Exactly. Yeah. So basically we do like a individual unit release of the mortgage for each one as, an individual like you or I goes and buys it. All right. We got first buyer. Gotta make sure you
get a commission. We got it on camera. So you're good.
Yeah, exactly. So we release our mortgage. And by the way, like not like to plug BridgeInvest, but like this is the type of creative stuff we do, right? Yeah. There are a lot of lenders that we compete with that like they need like simple business plans, right? Like come in, it's cash flowing. I'm gonna clean it up a little bit, more cash flow. Like that's what people understand. But when you get into like partial releases, like we may have competed with like no more than 5 other groups on that deal. For like your typical
5 other lenders.
5 other lenders that were competing for that.
Which one typically like the mortgage bankers at Berkadia, if a client, a borrower hires us to go look for a loan, we're reaching out to 50, 100 people.
Right.
You want to be the lender in a situation where there's only 5 other groups looking at it.
Yeah, and that's like just to further that, exactly what I was gonna say. Like, if he just was buying that to keep it as apartments, like the same business strategy, there would have been 20 lenders competing for that business, right?
For it.
And that's why we try to play. Like we look for deals. Like if the box is here, everyone wants to be in the box, right? Because lenders don't like make those big profits that we were talking about. So it's a lot of CYA, like cover your ass.
I like that.
Where if everything checks every box, right? Like a location, a sponsor, a property, a cash flow, like that's what everyone wants to do. But
which
then everyone
competes
and drives down the returns, right?
Your 10% doesn't go to 11, it goes to 8.
Right, or like 6. Exactly. So what we look for is like, if you take that box, can you just go like 1 step, maybe 2 steps outside of that, where like you still have a deal that has like an incredibly high likelihood of succeeding, but we're gonna charge like twice as much as the people in the box.
Right, not 6, 12.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what we look for as a business.
Got it, smart. And now I'm interested to know the market, right? I'm gonna give you my take as a broker, and then I'm just curious for your take, right? So obviously we sold deals in 2021 and early 2022 at the peak of the market. We would have 30 offers. They'd be super aggressive. Obviously the 10-year was very low, but we literally sold deals at like a 2.6 cap, 2.8 cap, like absolutely wild. Even us, we were like, this is insane, right? So that happened. Interest rates shoot up, asset values obviously come down. But a lot of these people were buying deals with 3-year floating rate debt, maybe with some 1-year extensions. And I thought that by like 2024, 2 years after interest rates shot up, we were gonna start seeing not a lot of distress, but like people having to sell, like, hey, I bought it at the wrong time, too high, loan is, my loan, I'm not getting my extensions, whatever it may be. My read of the situation is that lenders, maybe you're one of them, are sort of like being, very understanding that it's a capital markets problem, that the property's still performing well, and they're kicking the can of a lot of these deals, right? And it might not be loans that you're saying, we might just be talking about bridge loans in general. I don't want to, speak like BridgeInvest is doing this, but being very reasonable and just kicking the can and being like, we don't want to sell now because it's a terrible time to sell. And, you know, I think now people are coming around to the sentiment of rates staying higher for longer. You know, we're at, let's say 4.5 to 10 years at like 4.5. It doesn't, I feel like people don't think it's just going to go back to 3 or whatever it, you know, could go down to. So I see like now we're finally getting to the point, at least I believe, because I'm getting calls from owners where they were like, we were kind of in trouble in 2023. We were kind of in trouble in 2024. And like, yeah, we're really feeling it in 2025. And I'm having to pay, you know, rate caps. I'm having to pay this. My loan's coming due. So I am of the opinion that like the second half of this year, or like as rates stay higher for longer, more and more things will fizzle to the surface. That's my take, and I'm curious kind of from, you know, your world. By the way, I'm a broker. I just talk. Listen to John. You know, like John's actually looking at numbers and stuff.
No, it's funny because I don't know if I have like a hot take that's too different from what you're saying.
Okay.
I'll maybe add a little bit of flavor. So we at BridgeInvest are not really in the same boat as most groups that like will be the deciding factors relative to what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because for us, like, remember that box? Like that box was multifamily in 2001, 2022 at a 2 cap. And like we didn't do any of it, right?
Smart.
Lucky smart.
Yeah, I'll take it.
So the thing is for us, like the deals that we were doing were like more opportunistic in nature. And like, look, our portfolio is performing extremely well. I mean, we actually just sold our largest non-performing deal, which like we lost a lot of sleep over, for a full payoff.
Oh, amazing.
Like everything, principal, interest, even a little bit of money on top of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not to say that we don't have some problem assets that are still keeping us up at night, but you know, if you're that multifamily debt fund that did 100% multifamily lending in 2001, 2022, like whether you tell anyone about it or not, 100% of your loans are bad. So what do you do when your entire portfolio, 100%, is like not performing?
You have to be in Bank of America with 2,500 loans where you're like.
So what has happened is, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier in this conversation. I think that what the regulators figured out is that like, just because things are bad today doesn't mean it's bad tomorrow. And if things are kind of going okay, right? And most of these borrowers are feeling pain, but like they are paying or paying most of it or something of that nature. Like they're finding ways to kind of make it work, right? Like if you're just a bad borrower and you're just not making any payments,
it's not like, hey, 80% of my apartment rental are now unemployed people. And it's like, that's a problem.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right, that's not the case. Hey, it's mostly
the loan's
just
expensive.
Right, it's mostly just the loan is too expensive, we pay too much, but the asset is performing. So the regulators have not really put pressure on people.
And when you say regulators, like who?
Like literally like the federal government regulators, right? Because like, you know, you don't think about it, right? But like, you're like, okay, is BridgeInvest like subject to that? Well, not directly. I mean, we are SEC registered, but what happens is like we also borrow money from large banks. You know, like not every dollar of money that we lend to a real estate owner comes from us. Like we also borrow from banks.
It could be, hey, you know, I'm making a loan at 10% and I'm borrowing at 6 or 7 from the bank.
Yes.
Because the bank, if I'm at 70% of leverage, the bank's at 30, 40% of leverage.
Exactly.
So they feel even safer.
Exactly. So that's how we make 13, right? Out of 10. Right?
I'm on to you. I'm on to you, man.
So the regulators, I don't think have put, you know, pressure on people. And
but for good reason, right? Because I feel like...
No, I think it's smart. I wish they didn't, just because like A, we'd make a ton of money, and B, I'd probably get into the equity business again and like buy a ton of assets. But like if you put on your just like what's good for the world or like the US
world peace,
right? Like letting things ride has been smart. Now what I will say is we just got back. There was like 3 or 4 major real estate conferences in the beginning of the year. Like I'm sure you were at NMHC. We were there. Alice, MBA, Cref Seed here in Miami.
Cref Seed was here. You were at the event.
Exactly. So I am hearing from people that they're just like, all right, like this is the new world order. 10-year treasuries are probably going to stay somewhere in the range where they are today, which I personally agree with, right? Like, if you listen to what the Fed says, they say 30 month, 1 month. So like 30 days SOFR should be like 3, right? So if a 1 month loan costs 3, like a 10-year loan probably should be somewhere around 4, which is roughly speaking. So we are where we are, and things aren't really changing, and they're just like a little bit sick of it. And we've seen a pickup like live in our pipeline, where all of a sudden I'm seeing all these deals where it's like, hey, I did my loan in 2021, whatever, and I thought it was going to be last year, because that's 3 years, right? And most of these deals, most of these deals are like 3-year initial terms. That's just like the general bridge loan is like 3 + 1 + 1 in terms of years and extensions, those last 2. But we didn't see it. And now we're seeing a lot. And it's interesting because some kind of work, but a lot don't.
Work, you're saying like the deal itself or what?
Yeah, like you can refinance that debt, maybe it's a little higher leverage or something like that, but like it's workable, A lot of them don't work. And I think what you're going to see second half of this year, like in terms of your business, which I would be excited about if I was you, is I think a lot of those people are going to get enough pressure where they're just going to be like, yeah, I just have to sell. Because the only way I get out of this position is like, it's still worth more than the debt, but only by a slim margin. Right. So I think it's finally coming, but we should do this again in a year. And like see what happens.
So you want to laugh. Part of our advice to clients that have been wanting to sell is, hey, we think you should actually list your property now. Because there's a scarcity premium in the market.
Interesting.
Because there's just barely any owners looking to sell right now, right? Because they're all doing this. Whereas we have a handful of listings out right now, but one of the, a listing that we took out got 35 offers, which is like the amount of activity.
What kind of asset? Like
it's
A, B, multi-offer?
Class B value add deal. Half of the units are unrenovated. And it's a 9-figure deal. It's a $100 million deal. So it's not like a $30 million deal. And we got, when there's things I can't say and not say, it's a live deal, but 35 offers is even more offers and activity than we saw in 2021, right? And what we think is like, there's just a lot of pent up demand. Mind you, valuation has never been so all over the place, right? Because everyone's just trying to kind of gauge how they underwrite an asset nowadays. So the bids are everywhere. But what we're saying is, hey, if you wait till the second half of the year, when potentially there's going to be more people needing to sell, your deal is going to be 1 of 10 in the market. Whereas right now, I literally think I have like the 1 9-figure value add deal in South Florida. Maybe there's 2, but everyone's looking at it. So that's our advice. We'll do the thing a year from now and see if that was a good call. But we did have a good call, I'll tell you. We did have a good call in late 2021, early 2022, when the market was super hot. A client, asked me and 2 other brokers or competitors, what's your advice on timing? Because we've got one building that's stabilized and we have another building that's like in lease up or something like that. And we were like, dude, the market is so hot right now. This is talking 2021. Just go out right now. Like, we'll literally go back to our office, take them out. Like, people are going to underwrite that second one just as much as the first, and like, you're good. And they went with a broker that was like, you should wait until it's stabilized, and then we'll go out together stronger. It's a bigger deal, yada, yada, yada. And the wait was like first half of 2022.
Right. And then
market, they still own the asset, and they're kind of like, and we're like, as a broker, you can never call it back and be like, kind of told you so, like, well, the market, you should strike while the iron's hot.
But the one thing I'll say is, like, from the debt side of the equation, like, just to be like completely transparent, like, it got like a bit tighter last year, right? Meaning more competitive in the debt space. And we were like, okay, like it's kind of similar effect. There's not that many deals.
Yeah.
So even though maybe there was 20 lenders, or whatever, 100 lenders in the market, and now there's 50 lenders in the market,
Yeah.
well, there were 1,000 deals and it went to like 100 deals, right?
Correct.
So just the shrinking in volume was more than the shrinking in capital sources,
Yeah.
right? So more competitive, really.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, once the deal started expanding, like it's going to be great, right? And I will tell you, like, look, I don't think the story's fully been written yet. Like it's early in the year, but like live right now, like although the transaction volume is picking up, we're still seeing it be pretty competitive.
Yeah.
Especially for like Class A multi.
Competitive, as you're saying, like
The lending environment is competitive.
Well, I just feel like there's people that want
Especially that box, by the way.
Yeah, there's people that want to put out debt, right? Like I have obviously a lot of relationships with buyers, and like they haven't bought anything in 2 years.
Right.
So you show them a deal, and they're like, I may be way off your price, Omar, but like here's an offer. You know, like
Right.
I need to do something.
Right.
Especially my friends that like aren't the owners of the shops. They're like, I need to prove my job. You know, like I need to go tour your asset and make a bid. Actually, and I'm like, come on down.
Yeah, perfect.
You know, so. Walk me through, I guess, like maybe like tips and tricks, just out of my curiosity, of like things that are going poorly in loans. What are some type of workouts? Because you always hear this, loan workouts, right? And you've lived through that in '08, and you're a lender now. So like, what are some remedies to like some loans that like are struggling?
Look, in the grand scheme of things, even lenders that I think are more ready, willing, and able to take over assets, in the grand scheme of things, like no lending shop is built to own real estate, right? Like we're pretty nimble. We had to foreclose on assets. We were more than happy to do it because like that was the right thing that we had to do to protect our investors' interests. But like that's not what we want to do. We want to clip coupons and get paid off.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Yeah. And we're like way in the ready, willing, and able space, right? Yeah. Most lenders are way over here.
Right.
So what I would tell you is if you can prove your value to the lender, like they're willing to work with you, because the reality of the matter is like they're probably not going to manage the asset better than you, right? So even if for a period of time, because like your asset technically is not maybe worth much more than the debt or something like that, just if you're honest with yourself, you're kind of becoming an asset manager for your lender.
Right.
Like, and that's a weird thing for owners to think about.
It's like, you kind of own this property right now, not me.
Yeah.
I'll keep doing the motions. Yeah.
But like, I think most lenders will let you ride it out as long as you're not making the asset worse.
Yeah.
And be transparent, just be like a good person. Because guess what? There are a lot of bad people out there.
For sure.
And what the lenders are going to do is they're going to sit there and say, okay, here's my book. I got 10, I got 20, 100, whatever it is. And they're going to like put it in categories.
Yeah. They're going to be like, I like John. I'm going to work.
This is a bad situation. This is average. And this is good, right? Yeah. What they're going to do is they're going to start over here, right? And then work their way over here. Yeah. So, and that, if that takes 2 years or 3 years, you might save yourself, right? Yeah. So, be transparent, be honest. I think a lot of people like think they can like outsmart lenders. Like, most people are pretty intelligent. Like they know what's going on, so, if you're willing to like work together, then I think lenders will work with you, It's tough once you get into the distress space. Like every deal is different,
Yeah, there's a million things going on.
It's just it's funny because like on the origination side, which is where I spend most of my time, like we know the deals to look for, we know which levers to pull, like we know what we can offer over here to get this. Like we kind of have these like tips and tricks, like you're saying, like a toolkit, right? But on the workout side, like
you're like,
it's so hard because like the other person on the other side of the table, like they're distressed, right? And people act like really differently when they're distressed.
Crazy.
And you'd be it's hard to
Some people do a 180.
Yeah, they're like totally different people. And by the way, it's institutions and individual. There's maybe some stereotypes I can say, but it's just interesting. Like the workouts are all really different, so it's hard to like be specific. But like also think about like the future, right? Like this is why I go back to like just be honest, be transparent, and be a good person because it's not as relevant like today because it's kind of been a while. But like in 2015, 16. When we were looking at loans, a lot of those borrowers had a foreclosure 3 years ago, right? And what do? Right. You call that lender, like you say, hey, what was Bobby like over there when he was in stress? And some guys are like, you know what? He was a real professional. Yeah. And I'm like, I'll lend to that guy. And then some are like, oh my God, lawsuits, this, that. And like the last thing you want as a lender is like anyone that's like suing lenders, like that you can't touch that guy. Yeah. So I would tell you don't sue your lender unless you have a really good reason for it. Like that's the worst option. Yeah.
And then I guess two last sort of questions as we're wrapping up here. One is general advice for like younger people. I know you already gave one tidbit, but just like they see you and they're like, wow, that guy's sharp and it's got it going on, and you know, I kind of want to be in a trajectory like his in 5-10 years, whatever it may be. Things that you did that maybe were atypical that you think maybe others didn't.
You know, it's funny because it's like all the cliches, but the cliches are accurate in the sense of there's a few like core values, and this is something that like we really stress at the company that really lead to success. And those core values don't change between our accounting team, our investor relations team, our asset management team, our origination team, right? Like those core values propel you to succeed regardless of what you're doing, right? So figure out your own core values, right? Like I think a lot of people are always like running around. They don't stop to think about like, hey, like what are my values? Like what do I want to believe in, right? And I think if you have like that self-awareness of what you want to believe in, and like you have kind of like your own code of conduct. I mean, obviously don't have a bad code of conduct, right? But if you sort of give energy towards being a good, hardworking, smart person, and you stick to that, like you'll succeed. The other thing that's like for younger people that I think is tough but really important, I think something that like I was able to add value just personally speaking, and why I think people I was ultimately successful is you get this job, right? And your job is X, whatever X is. And you're like, I'm going to be awesome at X. But if you really want to add value to a company, you should really understand how X fits into the whole pie. And like how you should make decisions and actions in your world that affect others, right? Like if you can sit, I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, right? Like it's awesome if you tell me like what your personal idea of a good loan is, right? But like if you happen to also communicate with our investor relations team and you hear what our investors are telling them, and then you're like, even though like this might be a really good opportunity, but you know what? Connecting the dots from what I'm hearing over there, I think actually, you know what? This is the better opportunity.
Like this is what they're looking for.
Right, this is what they're looking for. Then all of a sudden, it's like exponential, right? So
because you're opening doors that weren't even asked of you to open, and you're
right, exactly, right. Like taking that initiative. That's one of our core values.
There you go.
So I think that that's really valuable.
Super important. And like you said, people forget it because sometimes they just head down. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to go here. I got to, check, and they don't realize the self-awareness.
Especially these days with all the emails and that, it's hard to kind of get your head up, But like, even if you don't particularly like the part, like meaning they're not your friend or something, like just go have lunch with someone that does something else at the company, for no good reason.
Just ask him questions.
Right?
I had lunch, like this happened like a couple months ago with a cybersecurity guy in our office. It just sits there, nobody, and I'm like, let's go grab lunch. I asked him a million questions, Like,
and he probably loved it.
Yeah, and I loved it too. I was like, that's interesting, So my closing thing is just, I want to talk about Miami, because you've been here for a long time. And I guess, do you have a take? Have you seen things slow down? Do you still think, I guess, what's your just riff on Miami?
It's tough because we know it so well. There's so many angles to take, right? So I'm trying to give you like one sentence versus 1,000.
Yeah, dog, man. How about it? The floor is yours.
Look, I think that Miami has permanently changed. Like again, right? Like the people that are here, the companies that are here, the industries that are here have changed, and I don't think it's going back. I think there are some like individuals going back. So there were a lot of just like people that were here for a year or two during COVID, but like ultimately their whole families are in New York or something like that, and they're going back, right? But I don't think like the city as a whole is going back to 2019, right? I do think that there was like a little bit of like a bubble, right? You can kind of see it in the office leasing. Like the office leasing market was crazy. Now it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
Now it's okay because buildings are full. Yeah. Unlike other places where they're empty.
Yeah.
But I think that there's like a little bit of like that bubble pullback. Mm-hmm. But it's tough. I mean, when you look at the resi side, like the premium stuff is just as premium, if not more than it used to be. Yeah. There are, I think that like we're at a little bit of like an inflection point. Yeah. And I'm a little bit careful when we do Miami deals right now, because I think that like lenders in other places like still have like this like rosy colored glasses view of Miami. Yeah. And it's still super positive. So don't take this the wrong way. It's just like where
if the expectations here and yours are here,
like, it's just, I think it's just, you need to be toned down a little bit.
Yeah.
But traffic is a huge problem.
Yeah.
I live up in North Miami, commute to downtown for work. And the infrastructure of the city, I think, is something that like the powers that be need to really think about. Yeah. Because I think if we grow much more, it's really, the infrastructure is not there. Yeah. So I that's a problem. I think that affordability, just for the average person, is something.
Starter homes are non-existent.
Yeah, like there's no starter homes.
Well,
right?
Maybe now at Wake.
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah, everyone's moving to Wake, Biscayne.
You're welcome, Isaac. Yeah.
We're gonna sell 200 units off of this podcast.
This is your broker, right? Amazing. This is your resi broker right here.
So, look, like any city, there are a lot of challenges, but man, like, where else in the world do you want to be, right? Like, it's still very livable here. Yeah. Good weather 100% of the year, basically, right? You can go out on the water. Amazing restaurants, amazing, theater entertainment options. Again, the financial sort of services, like big business has come here and really increased like the job opportunities in the market. I mean, overall, super bullish on South Florida, right? Yeah. It's just like, you get into these times like COVID where certain things have so much momentum. It's like, this is never going to end.
Something needs to pull back.
Right? Yeah. Like, it's just pulling back.
But I am surprised to your point that like the premium stuff hasn't pulled back all that much. Like the people that, I guess are billionaires are like, that's kind of where I want to park my stuff. We have a partnership with Knight Frank, these global real estate investors that have a lot of connections in Saudi Arabia, Asia, Middle East. And they're like, Omar, for the first time in my life, these people that buy $50+ million homes, they've always told me, should I buy one in London or should I buy one in New York? And he's like, for the first time ever, they're all, not all, but like most of them are asking me, should I buy one in London or Miami?
Right.
And he's like, sitting in London, like Miami, like that's where you want to buy one, And he's just like, it's crazy,
Well,
it's amazing.
The weather's similar to the Middle East. So.
I tell people success is a lot of like good timing and being lucky, and you always have to, put your head down, work your ass off, and be playing the game hard, which I know you do, but we're very lucky to be here. I feel like.
No, for sure. I mean, we've definitely all been a benefit of that, right? Like, I mean, now it's back or whatnot. I mean, for the most part, but man, if you were like a New York City investor in 2020 through 2023, like, it was tough, right? And I don't want to get too political, but take what you want of it, right? And maybe you had your differences of opinions throughout the years, but I think like the pro-business mindset of the government here in Florida and South Florida has been a big benefit.
Yeah, I definitely bet on that. Well, John, can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Appreciate it, man.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.